this is a ukulele tutorial for a relatively simple chord melody arrangement of the beautiful song Smile as written by Charlie Chaplin. I've also made a video tutorial for the chord sequence of this song, which I'll link to in the card above, that it may be worth you watching first as I'm basing this arrangement on the same chord progression. My arrangement's in the key of F major, which is a common key for it to be played in and suits the ukulele well. Before we get into breaking the song down, please subscribe to my channel. It really helps me out with making more of these video tutorials moving forward. If you would like a PDF of the tablature before watching this tutorial to follow along with, either buy me a coffee, see how to do so in the description below the video and I'll email a copy over to you, or alternatively you can join me over at Patreon where all my tutorials and accompanying PDFs can be found in one place. The link for this can also be found in the description below. With chord melody arrangements such as this, the general rule with the fretting hand is to try and hold the fretted chord that starts each bar as long as possible, as most of the picked melody notes will already be in that chord. Sometimes we may need to add or take away fingers in order to find the other melody notes as we go. We're basically trying to be as economical with our fretting hand as possible. I'll explain how I would go about this during the tutorial, but also feel free to experiment for yourself, as you may find a way that works better for you. As to the strumming and picking hand, for the sake of this tutorial, I'll be just using my thumb, both to strum the chords and pick the individual melody notes. You could equally use your fingers to strum and pick, or use a combination of both. Please experiment with this, as there's no right or wrong way to do it, and you will generally find one of these combinations works better than the others for you. The form of the song is a 16-bar chord sequence that would be repeated twice if we were singing the lyrics of what is effectively 2 verses. So for this chord melody arrangement we only need to learn those 16 bars and then repeat it again and finally add an ending. A quick note on the tablature at the bottom of the screen, where you see a vertical line of numbers like the first beat of bar 1, that is going to be a strummed chord, in this case an F, as per the chord diagram now shown. And where you see a single number, as per the 1 on the E string in the second beat of bar 1, this would be an individual picked note that would generally be part of the melody of the song. Hopefully that all makes sense. So let's break this arrangement down and work through it bar by bar. In the first bar we strum a full F chord on beat 1, and then we pick a single F note at the first fret of the E string, which is already in that chord, so there's no need to move our hand from the F chord, which is good because then we need to strum another full F chord. After this, without releasing the F chord, we add our third finger to the third fret of the E string and pick that note, a G. And then finally we pick the open A string, the string nearest the floor. Then for the second bar, we're going to play a sequence of 4 descending notes, a G at the third fret of the E string, an F at the first fret of the same string. We're then going to play that same string open, which is an E, and finally we play the note at the second fret of the C string, which gives us a D note. I tend to play these 4 notes while still fretting the F chord by adding my third finger to that G note at the third fret of the E string, and then releasing it to get the F at the first fret, already in the chord, and then I take my first finger away off that string to play the open E string, and finally I add my third finger, tucked under my second finger that is still down, to the second fret of the C string to get that final D. You could of course choose not to hold the chord shape through the second bar and just play those 4 notes however you want to fret them. So bars 1 and 2 would sound something like this. In bars 3 and 4, we play the same rhythmic pattern as bars 1 and 2, but this time we're going to start in bar 3 by fretting this partial F major 7 chord with no root, that you're probably more familiar with as calling an A minor. But in this context we're calling it F major 7. Again, we strum the full chord on the first beat of the bar, then pick the open E string, then we strum the full chord again, and then we add our first finger to the first fret of the E string and pick that individual F note, and then we add our third finger to the third fret of the same string to give us a G. In bar 4 we're again playing another descending sequence of 4 notes, but this time they are F at the first fret of the E string, then the open E string, then a D at the second fret of the C string, and finally the open C string. So bars 3 and 4 would sound something like this. In bars 5 through to 8, we have the same rhythmic pattern of strum, pick, pick in each bar, but with a different chord starting each bar. In bar 5, we start with a partial F6 chord, which again you're probably more familiar with as being called a D minor, but in context here it would be referred to as an F6. We strum the full chord, then pick the D at the second fret of the C string, already in the chord, and then we strum the full chord again. Then we take our first finger from the E string and pick that string open, and then put that finger back on and pick the same string again. So, bar 5. In bar 6 we change this to an A flat diminished 7 chord, and we play the exact same pattern again of strum the chord, pick the D at the second fret of the string, strum the full chord again, then take our first finger from the E string and pick that string open, and then put that finger back on and pick the string again. So, in bar 7 we change to a G minor and we strum the full chord, pick the G at the third fret of the E string, already in the chord, strum the chord again, then take our first finger from the A string and pick that string open, and then put that finger back on and pick the same string again. So, and then in bar 8 we change to this rootless D7 shape. We strum the full chord, pick the G flat note at the second fret of the E string, strum the chord again, and then add our third finger to the third fret of the E string, giving us a G note, and then finally pick the open A string. So that would sound like this. So bars 5 through to 8 would sound something like this. In bar 9 we go back to the G minor chord, we strum the full chord, pick the note at the A string, which is a B flat, strum the chord again, but this time I do release the chord and then pick the notes C and D at the third and fifth fret of the A string respectively with my third and fourth fingers. Then in bar 10, where we've effectively changed to an optional G minor 7 chord, we pick the note C at the third fret of the A string, and then B at the first fret of the same string, then the open A string, and then finish by picking the G at the third fret of the E string. Those two bars would sound something like this. In bar 11 we're changing to a B flat minor chord, and again we strum the full chord, pick the note B flat already in the first fret of the A string, strum the full chord again, and then I'd release the chord again to pick the note C and D flat at the third and fourth fret of the A string with my third and fourth fingers. And then in bar 12, where we've effectively changed to an E flat 9 chord, we pick the same sequence as in bar 10 of a C at the third fret of the A string, then a B flat at the first fret, and then an open A string, and then finally a G at the third fret of the E string. So bars 11 and 12 would sound something like this. In bar 13 we go back to our tonic chord F major and we strum the chord, pick the open A string, strum the chord again, and then I'd release the chord again to pick the B flat at the first fret of the A string, and then the open A string, and then in bar 14 we just go back to play the B flat at the first fret, then the open A string again, and then the G at the third fret of the E string, and finally an F at the first fret of the same string. So, and then in bar 15 we go back to a G minor chord, we strum the full chord once, then pick the G at the third fret of the E string, then pick the D at the 2nd fret of the C string, then strum the full chord once more. Then for bar 16 we're going to change to a C13 chord, where we're just going to play the full chord twice on beats 3 and 4 of the bar. I find the best way to fret the C13 is to take your G minor chord from the bar before and slide the whole shape up 2 frets, and then drop your first finger as a bar across all 4 strings at the 3rd fret, and you're left with the C13 pictured. So bars 15 and 16 would sound something like this. At this point we reach the end of the 16 bar form, and we would go back to bar 1 to repeat the same 16 bar sequence once again for the 2nd verse. If we want to end the song after the 2nd verse, we could just play a single F chord, but I prefer to add a slightly more jazzy 2-bar ending by strumming a single F on beat 1 of the bar, and then 3 strums of E flat 9 as a triplet in the 2nd half of that bar, and then another strummed F on beat 1 of the next bar, and finally a strummed F6 at the 5th fret on beat 3. So if I play the final 2 bars of the song and then the ending, that would sound something like this. So that about wraps it up for my arrangement of Smile in F major. In a moment I'll play through the whole arrangement with the tablature on the screen. As I said at the beginning of the video, I've linked in the cards above to another tutorial with a chord sequence for this song, and I've also linked to a backing track I've created to aid practice. If you found this tutorial helpful or have any questions, please leave a comment, give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, as I regularly post video tutorials for ukulele at all different levels. If you'd like a PDF of the tablature for this arrangement, buy me a coffee, see how to do so in the video description below, and I'll email a copy over to you. Or alternatively, you can join me over at Patreon, where all my tutorials and accompanying PDFs can be found in one place. The link for this can also be found in the description below. Thank you for watching, and bye for now.